Dealing with a worldwide pandemic is also causing some changes in the way we deal with hurricane season and hurricane preparations here in the coastal bend. We do have a couple of disturbances that we're watching, three actually, that Bill will talk about in a moment. One heading for the Gulf of Mexico, another one off the upper Texas coast. No immediate cause for concern, but this is the time of year that we always keep a close watch on the tropics. And yet, how could the coronavirus pandemic impact the state's ability to handle a major storm if one were to come to Texas? Here's what State Representative Todd Hunter told us today.
We're still in the pandemic. Now, what they're doing is they have new emergency rules. If a storm starts coming to our area, evacuation procedures will be done earlier. In addition, they have rules now for on-ground traffic and air traffic to move people out of the area earlier than usual.
An interesting development there, air travel for evacuation. But because of the COVID threat, Hunter says the state has new evacuation rules that will include temperature testing and social distancing. So taking the pandemic into account.